Hello, and welcome to episode number 187 of the Board Game Barrage podcast, a podcast about board games, the latest hotness, and how to have fun with your friends, even when you're losing. I am Kellen, the Red Tank, joined as always, by Mark and Neelan.
Hello. Hey.
How are we all doing?
Doing pretty good.
I love that part at the beginning of other podcasts where it's like, how are you? What did you have for dinner? Oh, I see a beer in your hand. Wow.
What are you drinking?
What is it? Oh, beer. Oh. Today on the Board Game Barrage podcast, we are going to be drafting. We are drafting a set of 5 board games from BoardGameGeek's set of best board games, specifically the section 200 to 300. This is the third part in the series where you can win a $50 gift card to your online board game retailer of choice by choosing the best collection once the draft commences. That will be found at boardgamebarrage.com/draft. But before we get to that, we are going to be talking about the games that we have played this week. And boy, do we have a hot slate of games to talk to you about. Mark is going to tell us about Raiders of Scythia. And then together, we are going to discuss the Egyptian hotness, Ankh. Or as I like to say it, as close to a goose as I can. Ankh. How'd I do?
Great. Close to a goose.
All right, Mark. Perfect segue. Gooses to Raiders. Raiders of Scythia. Tell us about it, Mark.
You got it. So Raiders of Scythia, or Scythia, is the latest from Shem Phillips and Garfield Games with art from Sam Phillips, and is actually a re-implementation of an earlier game, one of, I guess, the North Sea games, Raiders of the North Sea. So Raiders of Scythia re-implements Raiders of the North Sea, taking a lot from that game, but also adding a couple twists. Raiders of Scythia, as opposed to taking place in a Viking theme, takes place in and around the Mediterranean. In the game, you are raiders trying to conquer parts of Assyria and Persia and Greece, accomplishing tasks and having a raiding party, and also scoring victory points. Surprise, surprise. The way this works, and the thing that made Raiders of the North Sea unique and is the sort of calling card of this game, is that it's a worker placement game, but instead of placing a worker and taking an action, what you do in Raiders of Scythia and what you did in Raiders of the North Sea is you place a worker, take an action there, and then remove a worker that's previously been placed on the board and take that action as well. So every time you are taking a turn, you're taking 2 actions, one for the placement and one upon taking the worker back, and then the worker you just took back is the one you'll use the next time around. You're doing this in an effort to recruit raiders into your party. So you'll have a tableau of cards that are going to be the raiders that are going to give you powers throughout the game. It's also going to give you a strength that is going to determine whether or not you're going to be successful in your raiding attempts. And they will also have passive powers that you can use that might protect you in combat a little, depending on where you are, or boost what you could do at various spots on the board. You can also, instead of recruiting those members from your hand to your tableau as part of your raiding party, there's another action that lets you use those cards as a one-time action, so you can use the cards as actions as well. The main sort of thrust of the game is that you'll be using this raiding party to go on raiding missions, again, across the Mediterranean. The way you do that is each location will have a threshold, so you need at least X amount of strength to try to succeed. Then you will roll dice that are going to add to your strength, but also give you wounds. And the more valuable a spot, the more dice you are rolling, so the more wounds you're potentially getting. So you'll roll the dice, it'll add to your strength. Depending on how much strength you have, you will get a certain number of victory points. You'll also get the spoils from that spot, so that's going to be the resources that you can use to upgrade your party, and also exchange for victory points and do things like that, a sort of typical resource conversion.
Wouldn't it be great if that existed in real life, Mark?
Resource conversion?
No, all the places that you wanted to raid, if it just had like a number on how hard it would be.
That would be great.
Like the Bellagio, 10 out of 10.
Yeah, that is my number one problem with raiding places, is I'm not sure how hard I have to go into it.
Yeah, my place would be like a 2, because I leave the door unlocked a lot.
My place wouldn't have a number because you guys don't know where it is, so it's like it would be mysterious. It'd be like off the board.
That's a modifier.
That's right. A twist in this game that wasn't in Raiders of the North Sea is that upon successfully conquering a location, and to be clear, you're going to always be successful in conquering a location because you have to have a minimum threshold to go there. It's just that if you exceed the threshold, you get more points and potentially less wounds. But once you conquer a location, you get the resources. And then in this game, again, unlike Raiders of the North Sea, a tile will have been placed in most of the spots, and you'll flip that over, and that'll be now a mission, some sort of goal that you can do, and another way to get points. And these will be basically resource conversions opportunities. So you might accomplish a task, flip this tile over, and it says exchange 4 coins for 6 points. That's that mission. Okay. And now there's another spot on the board where you can achieve the mission. So if there's a mission you can accomplish, you go to that spot and you go ahead and trade the resources in and you get the points. That's basically how the game works. I have played both Raiders of the North Sea and now Raiders of Scythia, and I can't really recall too much about Raiders of the North Sea because it's been a while ago. I think I played it when it first came out, but I remember enjoying it. I definitely remember enjoying it, and I think I enjoyed Raiders of Scythia more. The placing a worker, pulling off a worker has a lot of benefits to it. There's a lot of interesting things about it. First of all, it's the chance to do 2 actions per turn is cool. You know, just doing more stuff, it's better. There's also the idea that you have to sort of figure out, because all the spots are going to be available to you, whether or not they currently have a worker. But sometimes you wish that you could place a worker in a spot that's already occupied, or that you could take a worker off a spot that is not occupied. And there's sort of like a figuring out the best way to do things, because there are, and I didn't mention this, there are 3 types of workers. There are 3 levels of workers, and some workers do best in certain areas. So sometimes you really want to pull off that red worker because it'll help you do something, but you don't want to because it's not the best way to take the action. So there's a lot of considerations there as well. Building the raiding party is cool because every time you play, I can imagine, having a different tableau of workers that give you a different array of passive abilities. So there's that asymmetric sort of thing where you're building up your party. I think that if you are a fan of Raiders of the North Sea, I think this is, to me, certainly a Raiders of the North Sea replacement game. I think it's a Raiders of the North Sea killer, to use a cliche. And if you're not a fan of worker placement, I don't know if this is going to change your mind, but I think it's among the better worker placement games out there, I would say.
Yeah, I definitely think that if you're in the position of owning Raiders of the North Sea, I definitely wouldn't run out to grab this, right? It's not a substantial change over the original, to my memory of it as well. It has been a long time since I played North Sea as well. But I do think that everything down to the production, the art, the look of the board, North Sea has a very clean look, and in some ways, actually, Scythia is a little bit messier in spots in terms of board readability, but overall, the presentation is nicer, and the small things that it layers on in complexity aren't enough to feel, substantial in terms of weight, but they just give you more options, like the eagles that you can attach to your crew, the horses you can attach to your crew, deciding when to grab those. The colors of the workers seemed more significant to me in my memory than I remember of North Sea, where, like you said, because, the advanced workers are rarer, that's a bigger consideration as to when to grab them or not. Yeah, I thought this was solid. It's a clean, simple worker placement game, but it's pleasant as hell.
From what I read about this, isn't it combining some of the stuff in the Raiders of the North Sea expansions and then porting them to the base game for Raiders of Scythia?
That would make a lot of sense.
Potentially, yeah, that could be true.
There's a lot of these, West Kingdom, North Sea, and now we're in Scytheland. So I guess my question is Scythe or Raiders of Scythia?
Still Scythe. No mechs in Raiders of Scythia to my memory, so it's got that on it.
And that is Raiders of Scythia by Shem Phillips, with art by Sam Phillips and Garfield Games.
We all played Ankh, Gods of Egypt. This is the latest big Kickstarter to fulfill from Come On Games. This is the third in the, I guess it's a trilogy of games that Eric Lang has developed, which started with Blood Rage, Rising Sun being the second, and now Ankh. So these are all themed around different mythologies, and they all are troops on a map games that have surprisingly different mechanics thrown into the mix of each of them, whereas Blood Rage was heavily focused around card drafting. Rising Sun had some negotiation baked into the mix with alliances that you sort of made and broke. The way that Ankh works, surprisingly for one of Eric Lang's area control games, this is a hex-based map where you are taking control of monuments that exist throughout the map. So at the start of the game, there are regions, and typically depending on the scenario, which is actually one thing worth getting out of the way right off the bat, this game has a scenario book. So when you set up a game, depending on the player count and depending on the complexity level, you can lay out the map in different ways. You can set up your starting buildings. Certain sub-rules might change in the scenario. But once you've done that, there you have a map that is subdivided into regions. Some of these regions have artificial borders, which are camel trails. And that's important because you might be able to add borders later in the game, which is crucial. On your turn, you're going to be taking one of 4 very simple actions. You're going to move your troops around. You're going to add guys to the map. You're going to gain followers, which are kind of the main form of currency. That's going to be the way that you're going to be able to build new monuments to take control of later in the game. And then finally, you can sort of unlock one of your Ankh powers, which is your little tableau of powers that is not unique to you. This section of the board is not asymmetric, but as you're unlocking those powers, kind of in the vein of something like a Comet, you're getting sort of your unique selection of them. You also do have an asymmetric power that is specific to your god, and that's going to sort of flavor a lot of your playstyle in terms of how you're trying to move around the map, how you're fighting, how aggressive you need to be, that sort of thing. The game sort of also has this sort of event timeline system where as you're taking actions, these action markers move towards the end of the tracks, and when they trigger the end of the track, you trigger a new event. So that's the way you gain control of monuments. That's the way you start to subdivide these regions into new regions. And crucially, that's also where you trigger the big battle events, where you're going to go through every region, have a big battle, play some cards, again, sort of Comet style. I play a card, you play a card. We reveal, add those to our strength, and whoever wins control of their region. Everyone else dies, they get the victory point. And you keep doing this for the duration of the game. The end condition is very simple. Have the most victory points. Whether that means you got to the top of the track first, in which case you win immediately, or by the end of the game, whoever has the most wins. There is one last twist to this, though, which I think is the thing that has proven to be the most contentious thing about Ankh in the community, which is when you get to the end of the 3rd battle phase, so this is around, let's call it 60% into the game, the last 2 players, and the 2 players with the lowest victory points, will merge into one player, and they now have a shared win condition. Basically, you eliminate one of the player's entire board state, you reset your victory points to the player whoever has the least victory points of the pair, and now you're playing together. You each split your turns, you have 1 action each instead of 2, and you're now trying to win together. So kind of this massive change in board state that basically plays out for the rest of the game. So before I get into my thoughts on this, what did you guys think of Ankh?
I had a lot of mixed feelings about it when we wrapped up. I didn't know much about the gameplay prior to Neelan's teaching us the rules, but I'd heard about the merge mechanism and how contentious that was. I didn't have a problem with the merge mechanism. I should say I didn't think it was a deal breaker for me upon our first play. I think I would need to play the game a few more times to see. In our game, the merging parties ended up winning, and one of them, Christina specifically, said that she felt a little overpowered, and I can see that. I wonder if that would bear out upon multiple plays, if it's just like a too big of advantage. I suspect not, but I don't know. But I think the game is well designed. I think the merge mechanism is novel, and I think it probably works. The one issue I had with it is, and this is probably a result of it being my first play, is that I didn't feel like what I want to do in battles was clear. You play a card whenever you battle, and a number of them amount to something along the lines of like gaining for losing. Like you'll get points if you lose. There was a lot of situations where, both because of the card play where you gain from losing and because of the merging situation, like do I want to be part of the merging party? Do I not? I just never got a handle on what I wanted to do in every battle. Like there were a number of battles where I was involved in and I thought, do I even want to win this? Is it beneficial to me to lose this in order to, play the card to get my cards back? And that lack of clarity was frustrating for me because I just don't like games that are confrontational, that, encourage losing or make winning a potentially not good course of action. That said, I think if I was more comfortable with it, I would maybe learn to understand it, internalize it more, and maybe learn to appreciate it more. But it just was tough to grok to me first play of it. But I do think it's a solid game, for sure.
I wonder if the merge mechanism works better in groups that don't min-max the out of everything, because we got to the round where we knew the merge was coming, and immediately everyone started conspiring to do it perfectly, right? So that meant that whoever was going to be in third place wanted to have the right amount of board presence. And whoever was in fourth place, they wanted to have a bunch of follower tokens because that would get added to the third player's score. So we all started conspiring, even before we got there, on how to be in the best position for that merge to take place, which I don't think is the design intent of it. I could be wrong, because everyone is in the first round and the second round, everyone is just earning victory points, and then all of a sudden the game takes a sideways moment where everyone goes, oh wait, now what should we do? My trouble with the merge mechanism is that it only evaluates one pillar of how you could be winning, which is victory points. And so in this particular game, Christina and Neelan were 2 points behind me, but had significantly better board positions and board presence, because the strategy I was using was not a board presence strategy, and I had no money, which was essentially followers in the game. And so, yes, on the point track, I was ahead of them, but I felt like in reality, I was behind them, and then they combined into a superpower, were suddenly way better than me, and the whole game just became, can we stop them? And we could not stop them.
I think that my thoughts on merge actually echo both of yours a little bit, which is to say I genuinely didn't mind it. And to be fair, we need to caveat this, but I was the player in last place that ended up benefiting from the merge. But I found that moment, and I think Christina would agree, that moment of the merge happening felt exciting. It felt kind of like a new lease on life. It kind of just felt like, oh man, now the game is super interesting in a way that was compelling. And whether or not it felt fair to the two of you, I think you would all agree that it was a cool moment when it happened. And, that's...
but cool in the sense, I think your experience of fun was commensurate with our experience of this is stupid.
No, I know, but I'm not talking about mechanically or gameplay wise, but the event of it felt like, oh man, all my stuff comes up. Christina now has the process of going through the merge was just kind of like a big board state change. It's a big moment in the arc of the game. But the thing that Mark was saying was the thing that kind of stuck with me, which is that there was a moment right before the merge happened where Mark had a point where he could decide whether he was going to get victory points, and he was just damn, I don't know if I want this, or should I try? I could probably take the merge from Neelan, which is a weird thing to be considering at this point in the game. Do I actually want to be in third place right now versus at the top of the track? That is a weird equation to sort of have to balance in the middle of a victory point conflict game. It's just, I think to your point, Kellen, that I'm not convinced it is the design intent. And I think a lot of the defenders of the merge would probably say that, oh no, you've got to be aware of it and work your way around it. And it's well, yeah, but is that fun? Is that the part of the game that we really want to be angling for? And that I don't know. I do think that in order for the merge to be a thing at all, it has to be capable of winning at least some of the time. What that percentage is, I don't know. But it did feel a little bit in our situation, it did feel overpowered. We were not that far behind collectively, because I was 1 point behind Christina at that point, and we calculated it that way.
Well, and the merge could happen, right? And you could have been 10 points behind,
totally.
Or you could have been 1 point behind,
yeah.
And the same thing would have happened.
Right, exactly.
And there's two other screwy things that I think are important to note here in the merge, which is, one, that it's a pseudo form of player elimination, right? Because all of the decisions that Neelan had made up until that point of what to upgrade didn't matter. All of his decisions about how to place on the board didn't matter. And suddenly Christina had half of the agency that she had before, because she took one of the two actions and then Neelan took the other. But by function of them being sitting next to each other in player order, it was as if they were co-oping the game together. And there were a lot of times where Christina would say, I think we should do this. And then Neelan would say, no, we should do that. And it's essentially an alpha quarterback situation about what the two of you should do.
Sure.
That's the first weird thing. And then the second weird thing, and I've tried to describe this online, is in an area control game, a lot of people have to commit to staying through the whole game, even if they're losing. So imagine you're playing a game of Risk, and then the player who's playing Australia says, I can't win anymore, I'm leaving. That becomes a huge problem for the game because we don't know what to do with the Australia territory. Does it become neutral units? Because if you take off those units, then the person who's right outside Australia just wins the game because they get free territory. And so the way that this works in Ankh is that the player in fourth, all of their just comes off the board. And yeah, you can plan around it, but that actually benefited me in a major way. I was sitting right next to all this open land, and I don't really think there was a counterplay that Mark could have done to have anticipated that that was the land that was going to disappear, and I almost won the game. I think almost primarily because I got a bunch of free land as a result of Neelan vacating the board. And I don't even know how it's conceivable to balance around that.
Well, I mean, couldn't I have been sort of seeing which way the wind was blowing and set up better?
No, we were all in contention to be the last place person at that point. We were like...
I guess what you can do is plan for all eventualities is maybe one way to do it. I think there's a lot of like thinking and double thinking and planning that a group that's played it 6 or 7 times would account for that it was hard to see in our first couple plays. It might just force you to be more cautious. You might have to like say like, okay, it's advantageous for me with the idea of Christina being in 4th to do this, but if Neelan suddenly drops, I have to realize that I might be messed up. So maybe I shouldn't do that action, that set of actions, and I should be more cautious with the idea that it could be either them or it could be me. Like, you know, there's a lot to consider, I guess.
I think one of the things that's actually a good point that we might want to just segue into at this point is that it's a more spatially oriented game than I think a lot of these games, especially to my mind, the ones that Eric Lang has done, like Blood Rage and Rising Sun especially, where the map in both of those games kind of just feels like every region is 1 or 2 steps away from every other region. Because of the nature of the hex-based map, you are a little bit more restricted into where you can go in terms of territories from any given position on the board. So I think to your point, Kellen, I think there is definitely something to be said for, oh yeah, you were the most geographically close to, like, say, my territories. But then to Mark's point, is like maybe going into the merge, there's this idea that you position yourself in order to be able to adapt to however the board state changes, which whether or not it's a person getting eliminated or a person merging, which both of which can happen, the board is going to radically change at points in a game of Ankh.
Yeah, I mean, I think cool things happen and you have to react to it. But I think the idea that someone would have a grand strategy that involved Neelan merging with Mark, Mark merging with Neelan, Christina merging with Neelan, Kellen merging with Mark, and somehow being able to adapt with the rigidity of the action selection system is like bordering on absurd to me.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I also don't think that that's like in the wheelhouse of what the game is trying to do, right? It's looser than that.
Yeah. I mean, overall, right, how much of the decision-making it can front load into that action selection, which is really straightforward, is like crazy. Eric Lang is like a master of this. I'm speaking from a very critical place because this is probably my favorite genre of games. And like, I think Ankh is good. Ankh is good enough to say, yes, this is at least a 7 out of 10 for me. But there's so many things in it that I don't like, that annoy me, that we haven't even gotten to. I think I've got like 3 or 4 other really discrete, very specific things. Like the card play is not as good as Kemet. The action selection has a Puerto Rico problem where you can get screwed if one player doesn't realize that they're helping their neighbor so much, and you cannot plan around it in a 4-player game. It's just not possible.
Yeah.
Battle resolution is as procedural and annoying as Rising Sun. And like all of these things just like add up on top for me to be like quite clearly my least favorite of the 3. But that's a hot take. I would be happy to play it again, but I'm already trying to sell my pledge.
I think I have also enough small issues with kind of all the systems. I like the card play a lot more than you. I don't think it's as strong as Kemet, but like that's just to me the gold standard of like simple card play combat. But I did find the decisions interesting because every card in Ankh is paired with a very potentially powerful ability. And like finding the right time to use that ability feels bigger than like the strength value a lot of the time.
You use the word paired to say that it pairs with the strength value, but I would say it's the other way around. Every card has ability, and incidentally, some of them have a strength value.
Yeah, totally. To be clear, because like most of those strength values are like +0 or +1, and then one of them, which is the big attack card, is +3. But it's a game of inches where that +1 or the +0 is potentially a huge difference. I agree with what you're saying, that it doesn't feel like as much of a decision in terms of how much strength you're adding as it could be. But for me, it was about the abilities. Like the when to use each ability was like the crucial decision to me. I do want to comment really quickly on the 2-player game, which I have played, and I do think it alleviates a lot of kind of the issue we were seeing with the action selection, where when the turn gets back to you, which actions are critical to you is sort of unknowable depending on what the previous 3 people have adjusted that track. That obviously becomes a lot less chaotic in 2-player, and actually was one of the aspects I liked the most about the design of 2-player, which is the moving one thing up the track is something that becomes very, very calculable and something that's very important to like seeing, okay, I know that if I were to move this up here, then I'm going to be giving the other player the advantage a turn from now in terms of getting access to this event before I do. I liked that about it a lot. You also obviously don't have the merge in 2 players, so it just feels a little bit more back and forth, a little bit more tug of war in terms of each of the region controls.
Yeah, it's such an interesting case where like half of the threads online about the game are, can I just remove merging?
Yeah.
And what will it do? And like, it doesn't do anything for the most part. It's so entirely separated that it works on such a thematic level, I think, with the Egyptian stuff, which is really cool. I think my final hot take here, as an area control game, it's good. Eric Lang is really the best in the business here. If this was my first Kickstarter of his, I would be excited to keep playing it, but as it stands, it's like, well, I've got Blood Rage on my shelf. Well, I've got Chaos in the Old World. Well, I've got Cthulhu Wars, which is essentially a ripoff of an Eric Lang game. And so, like, I can't justify the 7 boxes and the 50 pounds and the $300 worth of Ankh that I have sitting here when there's so many things that I'm like, I just like this better. You know, if I want a shorter game, it's Blood Rage. You know, if I really want to feel the troops on the map, which again, this doesn't really feel like there's some of that, but it's not as much of that as you get in Cthulhu Wars. If I want the diplomacy, right, I'm going to Inish. And, you know, if I want the straight fighty, I'm going to Kemet. So it's like, where does this fit in? And so for me, as like a connoisseur of the genre, like I just can't fit Ankh in, even though I love the theme and I love how accessible it ultimately is.
Yeah, I'm in the same position with Rising Sun, right? Like, I don't want to hang on to multiple boxes for both games. And my initial take after a couple of games of Ankh is not edging out Rising Sun for me. I will play a lot more of Ankh probably in the coming weeks. So I'm curious to see how that impression changes. But it's not doing anything that feels exceptional in the genre to me, I guess, is probably the broadest way to say it.
And also, you didn't beat me.
I absolutely did.
Not if we remove the merge.
I just sort of echo what you guys said for the most part. I was, after being sort of trepidatious about Kickstarters in general and the mixed stuff I'd heard about Ankh, I was pleasantly surprised by how solidly it was designed. Like you said, a couple of gripes here and there, but I think a solid game for sure.
For sure, yeah. And beautiful. I mean, I don't think it bears even saying at this point, but commands like Kickstarter productions are elaborate to an absurd degree, and this one is no exception. It looks gorgeous just laid out on the table. That is Ankh, Gods of Egypt by Eric Lang and Command Games.
Before we get to our featured topic, we did want to shout out that we have a Patreon. If you want more Board Game Barrage, you can get that at boardgamebarrage.com/Patreon or patreon.com/Board Game Barrage. There we do bonus monthly episodes about things that we're interested in the world that is not board games, usually with a smidgen of board game content. We have also done entire drafts that are Patreon only. We have started recording off-the-record segments where we keep recording for about 10 minutes after each episode, and we sort of just shoot the breeze on how we felt like the episode went or anything we felt like we couldn't get in there. So if you're interested in off-the-record, if you're interested in bonus monthly episodes, if you are interested in secret Discord channels, you can subscribe to our Patreon at boardgamebarrage.com/Patreon, and it means the world to us. For those of you who do subscribe and help support the show, it pays for games, it helps gets us to conventions, and it pays for prizes and advertising, and really makes the podcast grow.
And a quick note to those in and around the Southern California area that we are going to be making our return to the convention life at Strategicon, their Gateway 2021 convention, which is Labor Day weekend, so that's September 3rd through the 6th. We're not sure exactly when we're going to be there. We're actually figuring out the details now, but we will be there, and we would love to meet and play with as many of you as possible. So if you're interested, go to Strategicon, STRATEGICON.net, and maybe learn some more about how to go, and hopefully we'll see you there.
And now on to our featured topic. For those who are joining a draft for the first time, we are trying to build a set of 5 games. And those 5 games that we are putting together, we are trying to appease you, the listeners. So after this episode, you are going to get a link at boardgamebarrage.com/draft. And you're going to click on one set of 5 games that you like the best. You will click on that, you will enter your email address, and you will be entered in to win a $50 gift card to an online retailer of your choice. How you choose to vote is up to you. If you love Red Tank, vote Red Tank. I can't stop you. You can evaluate this, whether it be a collection that the 5 games you wish you had, or the one that has the most games that you own. We allow you to vote any way you want. You just look at the list, you say, that is the 5 games for me. But today we're going to be doing the games in the range of 200 to 300 on the BoardGameGeek all-time ratings. So there are a lot of cool games. We have previously done 0 to 100 and 100 to 200. I kind of feel like we're getting into really the best games of all time, the stuff that is a little bit weirder, a little bit more different than the stuff that is crowd-pleasing in the 1 to 100. How have you guys been preparing for this draft?
Stretches.
I'm nervous because there is a lot of good games here, and I just don't know which way to go. There's a lot of good ones, I think.
Yeah, one of the things I think that was actually interesting when I was looking down the list is, as I was starting up, I was like, man, there's a lot of garbage in this part of the list, which is not really fair, obviously, because they're all great games, on some level at least. But I was finding some good stuff like further down, like closer to like the 300 end, and I don't know why that is exactly, but...
Where specifically did you find those?
No, don't you worry about it. That's all for me to know.
So I believe the way that we do this is we find the loser and then let the loser choose if they want to go first, second, or third. And Mark, as usual, as always, as in life...
Excuse me?
You are the resident loser.
I'm the only 2-time champion on this podcast. I've won 2 drafts.
I would prefer to be mediocre for life than to be a loser. As I have done. Actually, I am the king of average, okay? Mark, you know AP classes?
Yes. I took
AP classes.
Yes.
Okay, I did too. I took a lot of them.
Yeah.
Okay. On those tests, you can score up to 5.
Right.
5 is good. 3 is passing.
Yeah.
Are you ready for what I scored on every single AP test I ever took?
I have a very good guess, but go ahead.
3. King of average. Passed them all. Got college credit for them all, like more than 5, like a lot of AP classes. So,
yeah,
Kellen thinks he's smart, but 3 on all of them.
That's all you need.
Well, my ego needed 5.
I mean, with the passage of time, who cares? You got it. You got the credit.
Well, I'm still bringing it up to people, so.
That's true.
Apparently, I still care. But Mark, what position would you like to go in, first, second, or third?
Okay, well, there's never been a winner out of second place. So I will be the first. I'm going to take second.
Oh, interesting.
You cut out for me for a second, but I believe you said, there's never been a win out of second. I'm going to be the first. I choose second.
That's correct. I will take the second pick.
Okay. So who goes first?
So that's up to you, Kellen, I think, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I go first.
You go first.
You want to go first or third?
I want to go first.
Okay, I'll be third.
I don't think I've gone first.
No, yeah, I think you've been second every time, right?
Yeah, I've been third every time, and Neil's been first every time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Complete change.
All right. I am ready to make the first selection of the BGB draft, 200 to 300. There was a lot of ways I could have gone with this, and I'm not going to tell you all of the ways that I didn't go with this because I need to win. I need to not get second place again. I need to not be the 3 of the AP scores. I need your votes. So my pick here is going to make little Marky a little mad, a little jealous, a little upset, is 1830 Railways and Robber Barons. Now, this is the quintessential 18xx game. Now, many people will not have played this board game, which might make it a bad first pick, but the reason that I'm selecting it here is that there are not very many economic games between 200 and 300. I think 18xx is becoming more approachable. People are reaching to play it. I think this is an aspirational pick for many who love the pipelines of the world, who love the barrages of the world, who have played the City of the Big Shoulders. And here we have a great game that I have not played yet, but I'm very eager to play 1830, to try the true 18xx game, the train laying, the stock manipulation, and all of the hijinks that ensue. I think that if you were going to get a collection of board games, having 1830 on there is going to give you a lot of variety, a lot of mileage. I'm very happy with this as a first selection.
Yeah, that is a Big time call. I like it. It's brash.
It is. I agree. Yeah, it is. It is a winner or a loser for sure. So when I get 15% of the votes, you can all laugh at me again. It had to be fairly high on your list, Mark.
Yeah, it was definitely my short list without a doubt, for sure. I have a handful of games that I'm trying to select from. This is a tough call. I think it comes down to about 3 or 4 that I could select here. But the one I'm going to go with is probably the most approachable of the lot. And one I recently replayed with the Peloton expansion, which I really, really enjoyed. This is going to be Flamme Rouge. It is a racing bicycle game where you have a team of 2 and you're racing. Very quick card play, an interesting fatigue mechanism where if you're not in the pack, you could get fatigue. I hadn't played it in a while, and then replaying it recently, really, really enjoyed it. I think it is a great game, both for people who are new to the hobby and those who are longtime board game players. Not simple enough that it's boring, and not so complicated that you can teach it to anyone. Really enjoy it, and I think it has the most appeal, and it's a game I can get behind. So I'm going to go with Flamme Rouge for my first pick.
What's insane to me is that I have 10 soft selections here, and this is not even in that list of 10.
Interesting.
And not that doesn't make it a good pick, just that I literally would have picked, if I had 10 uncontested picks, this would not be on it.
Interesting.
It was definitely on my short list, so
I feel like this has a lot of people who love Flamme Rouge and a lot of people the cards that it's kind of boring. I think it's kind of boring. And I'm not trying to just disparage your pick. Card play is this weird, it tries to mirror the bicycle racing, right? And so there's a very weird arc where most of the time you're dinking and dunking and then you go in for the big, movement. It's very interesting for sure.
I have fun with it every time I play it though. And also it's so easy. It's so light you can explain it to a big group, and I have fun with it every time. So I'm going to get 2...
But also it was a dumb pick, right, Nealon?
Yeah, it was obviously dumb. I don't know why you would pick that right now, Mark, you idiot. I have 2 picks in a row, and I think I know what one of them is going to be, and I'm humming and hawing about the second one here. So let's just get into the first one real quick. There is a game which I think I might be, and this could be a very bad first pick. I'm debating this a lot, but it feels right to me. There's a game that has had such a prominent place in our community, particularly on Discord, in terms of online plays. It's sort of a recent game, but it's a nice chunky game. It's one that we like a lot. It is Tech Trees, the game Beyond the Sun.
Yep.
On my short list.
This is on my short list. Good choice.
The recency about it makes me a little bit scared, but I do think it's been rising in popularity over the course of the last little bit. So it could just be at a peak in terms of plays and knowledge, really, at this point.
Is that on Board Game Arena?
It is on Board Game Arena. It has a very good implementation on Board Game Arena.
I always like saying that because you can try this for free now on Board Game Arena.
And you should.
If you're into that.
You should if you have not played Beyond the Sun.
I will say on my short list, but not one of the games I was considering for my first pick.
Interesting. So
it was not one of the, no.
Okay, let's go into my second pick here, and this is harder. I think that there are 2 really good troops on a map games on this list, and I'm worried that they will not both make it back to me. I think that Cthulhu Wars is the one to pick. It is a big, big, big game. It is a big, expensive game, which just gives it a lot of pure weight in this list of 5. It is an aspirational game. It is a game that has a lot of replayability. It is a game that, whether you're playing a different faction in the base box or experimenting with the same faction, you're going to have a lot you can get out of Cthulhu Wars.
Also, my short list, also not one of the games I was considering for the top pick, but a good one. A good one for sure.
I think I would have picked it if you didn't. And I almost picked it first because I don't know that there's another game here that does enough of what it does. It's not like an Inish Komet situation. It's a little bit more standalone-ish here. And I'm not going to call out for Mark, who's scouring the list back and forth to find the stuff that's kind of similar. I won't do it. No, not giving out any more tips.
All right, I need to check in with a doctor, so I'm going with Modern Art.
Yep, that's good.
My next pick. Part of the Auction Trilogy and a fantastic game.
You dummies. Okay, so Modern Art is great, right? Modern art's great. But you know what's greater? A game that if you owned it, you could resell it for like $300 right now. So in strict value to the collection. My favorite board game designer's name is Karl Chudyk. And there is a very difficult to get Grail game called Glory to Rome. And this is rank 210 on the top games of all time list. This is one of the most infamous Kickstarters that has ever existed, as it has not been reprinted. It has brilliant Puerto Rico style follow mechanisms built into it. It has tons of card play, ridiculous combos, beautiful art design. This is a game that if I had to pare my collection down to 20, even though it is barely in my top 50, I would keep it. I would keep it because it's an art piece. I would keep it because the game is that good. People are constantly talking about making print and plays to this day of Glory to Rome in our Discord. They're like, is it worth it to print and play this for $75? And for many, the answer is yes. Karl Chudyk is a master. Glory to Rome is an amazing game. If innovation annoyed you, you want a little bit more formality, a little more rigidity, Glory to Rome is a fantastic pick, and one that I actually think pairs very well with 1830 as a crossover. For people who like an 18XX game, they probably like Glory to Rome in the lighter style of game that they would enjoy.
This was the other game I was considering for high pick. Yeah.
We're back to Mark.
No,
right?
it's you again,
No,
right?
it's you again.
Oh, I go twice?
Wrap around.
Oh,
First time ever.
Snake.
This never.
Snake, Kellen, like a snake.
Well, I've never had to do this. Sorry, I'm sitting here like, who's the dum-dum right now? It gets a lot harder to like now pair with what you have. Modern art was definitely high up on my list here to kind of give me that little bit of lower brow fun. I have to look at the pictures. They try to get me to do this all in a spreadsheet, but I'm much better at picking when I have the pictures. Is that a trap? No, it's not. All right, with the next pick in the draft, with the third pick in the draft, I will be picking the most... What is of the moment? What is a word for of the moment?
Zeitgeisty?
The most... You're giving me bad words. Zeitgeisty of all the board games on the list. This is Gale Force 9's Dune. Dune, the amazing high-level amount of players, asymmetrical powers, thematic game. This gets featured on a lot of our lists when we do top lists of best value board game, best asymmetric player power experiences. Dune has a new motion picture coming in October that you should watch so we can all get a sequel to Dune. If you have never had the experience of trying Dune, it is very interesting, especially in the context of it coming from the same designers as Cosmic Encounter. It has that level of crazy asymmetry as applied to sort of a troop conflict game or a people on a plane game. I think Dune is an amazing game and one that I spent hundreds of dollars to get a print and play of before Gale Force 9 reprinted it. Everyone should have a chance to try Dune, and I think it fits in nicely here with my collection of games.
All right, another tough call here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to look to the far, far distant future of 2030. The sci-fi classic Imperial 2030. Yeah. I think it's probably one of the top games left on the list. It is not a troops on the map game, but it's that area control, area conflict sort of game. It's got a very interesting aspect to it where you are not, sort of like an 18XX game, you're not really in control of any one piece. You're sort of taking over, instead of companies and railroads in 18XX, you're taking control of nations and trying to exploit them as much as possible. And yeah, just a really good game and really unique. So I'm going with Imperial 2030.
Okay, I am going to do what I'm going to call the Mark counter pick double whammy, where A, I protect myself from a much-loved Mark strategy by latching in one of the best games ever made. In fact, the number 2 best game of all time before Mark can steal it from me later in the draft, The Resistance. What a fantastic party social deduction game this is. This is the creme de la creme of that genre for me. This plays a big group. This plays an accessible group. You can get this out at a actual party. You don't need a table. You just need a couch to play The Resistance. It is incredible. Everyone should own and play it. This is actually my preferred way to play it because the expansions for The Resistance get you to Avalon, but that's kind of
What?
Yeah, my argument would be that it's been killed by Resistance Avalanche. Basically a non-game.
I don't know that
This
that's
is basically
true.
a non-game. It's like a zero-sum.
Nah, I don't buy it. The next pick on my list, though, I think does probably cut to Mark by
Yep, I already know.
me effectively doing what he did to me so many times. I'm going to take Arboretum.
Yep.
Mark's number 2 favorite game of all time.
Yep, I would have likely taken it there if you had left it. I love this game.
Arboretum is great because it's also a small boxed game that is, I wouldn't say easy to break out, but I mean that only in terms of size and table space. But it is a brain-ruining, like maddening knife fight in the phone booth type game where every decision feels brutal. Arboretum is brilliant. What a brilliant sort of complex game that comes out of just a deck of cards.
Yep, I can't argue with you there. It's fantastic. It is fantastic. I was worried that it was, I don't know, not popular enough or something, but I would have taken it likely with the next pick. But it's, I think it's a fantastic
Better
game.
than that For the King and Me game?
Shut up, Kellen. I keep feeling like, if you ever do like a fantasy sports draft, fantasy football draft, like you feel like your pick gets taken just before you would have taken it. I feel like a lot of that's going on here. I think the game I'm going with here is by far the best 2-player game on this list. Head and shoulders best 2-player game on this list. So I'm going to go with Hive for my next pick.
That's funny. I thought it was going to be Battle Line.
Oh, yeah,
Another
that's true.
fantastic 2-player. Hive is a great pick.
That is a very good call. No, you're actually that is a very good argument. I think Battleline is fantastic, but I just think Hive is a little more strategic. Battleline is a little more tactical. This is like appealing to the chess sort of situation.
Yep.
Unique where there's no board. You're just clicking these insects together, and they all have different powers. So yeah, a good call with Battleline, but I'm going with Hive for my 4th pick.
So do I get 2 again?
Yep.
These are your last 2.
This is crazy town. You guys can't stop me at all?
Nothing we can do.
So I got to take it home and not screw up, right?
That's right. But how could you screw up? You got this.
There's no screwing up here. All right. With the 4th pick of the draft, I am going to select Glen 2. So this is a game I actually have not a ton of experience with, but I know that the love is there. This is a Matthias Kramer design, super notable for designing Lancaster, Rococo, Watergate, among others, Craft Wagon. But Glen 2 is a revision of Glen, and there is nothing but buzz for Glen 2 Chronicles. I know it uses a rondel mechanism. It is a heavier weight Euro game, but still a pleasant depth. I feel like it will pair nicely with the other games that I have already selected. Though maybe Dune is a little bit of an outliner, but I'm definitely skewing heavier where Mark's list of Flamme, Rouge, and modern art, who's even going to play and Hive? What is it? His list is for children at this point compared to mine. With my 4th selection of Glen 2.
This was a game I was considering. Funny story about Glen 2. I participate in a bunch of math trades, but one thing I like to do is not open the boxes that I get from math trades until I forget the games that are in there, because then I like to be surprised about the games I have. So the game that I was trying to trade for desperately the most recently was Glen 2, because I really wanted to play it. And then decided recently to open up the boxes of the math trade games and realized that I had traded for Glen 2 in a math trade, and therefore was wasting my time desperately seeking it out.
You already own it?
Yes.
All right. With my final pick, I will tell you what I almost picked, but I did not pick, which was Isle of Skye. I do not want to go that low. With my last pick of the draft, I will pick one of the newest games on the list, Dwellings of Eldervale. This is as hot as it gets. This is a Kickstarter that is arriving. This is a worker placement game. It's a thematic worker placement game that, despite its appearances, I believe is outperforming my expectations, and I think most reviewers' expectations of how good this would be. I am very upset that none of us went in on this Kickstarter, because when you looked at it, you're like, this isn't going to be good. Sitting at an 8.4 rating. Obviously, it is a Kickstarter, so it has a little bit of buzz there. But I do think this is one that we owe it to ourselves to check out. I feel like it rounds out the collection nicely, but is a little bit of an off the beaten path. But am I going to get more out of Dwellings of Eldervale or Isle of Skye? I feel like I'm getting more out of Dwellings of Eldervale. I think I have a amazing collection of 5 board games here. I feel very good about myself.
Dwellings was not on any of my lists at all.
I understand.
You might catch the hotness there. I don't know, but...
Am I touching something? It's hot.
Well, Kellen's made a lot of fun of me for taking what he calls a lowbrow game. So if you like any of my games, he's calling you lowbrow, basically. Whereas I'm encouraging you to play these games. But I'm going to get lower. My brows are going to be hitting the ground here, I think. Because I'm going with a game much like Codenames. This is a game where I always sort of feel like I'm tired of it. But every time I play it, I remember why it's so great and why it's stood the test of time. I'm going to go with Dixit here.
Oh, interesting. That's not where
I'm going
you were going.
Dixit for my 5th pick. Yeah, there's another one that sort of fits that criteria. But Dixit has spawned so many games that are using the Dixit. I mean, a lot of games...
Sorry, is this 288 Dixit or 226 Dixit Odyssey? Clarification.
I always
Objection.
go classic Dixit. I always go classic, so I'm going classic Dixit.
All right, Nealon, pick Dixit Odyssey.
Yeah.
I'll give you $20.
Dixit is so solid and so renowned and so well known that a lot of games, when you're talking about the mechanisms and how you play them, that you'll say Dixit style. The art is Dixit style, or this art is abstract, and you have to pick the one that you think fits Dixit style. It's just a game that is, I know it's been around forever, but play it tomorrow and you'll enjoy yourself. It's a great game.
That was not on my short list, but I get it.
Yep, I get it, and I get it not being on somebody's short list too.
You start looking at them like in conjunction.
Yeah.
You're like Dixit and Imperial 2030. Not just yours though. You know, like mine. You're like Dwellings of Eldervale and 18XX, and you're like,
Yeah,
all right, Kellen, who is that person?
that's kind of where I'm at like now, is kind of like there are games that were high on my list, but they don't really gel with my other 4.
Take it, space-based Nealon. We'll support you
It's not a bad
I don't
pick.
think that's a
I wouldn't-
bad pick.
and take it.
I think, though, that I'm going to come in here with a cooperative game, Burgle Bros.
Mm.
I think that Burgle Bros has very widespread appeal, enough so that they made a sequel even. But I think the original Burgle Bros is excellent. It is a fantastic game with a cool production and a very accessible, fun co-op.
You made the joke so I didn't have to, which is that you picked 2 games that have been remade already.
The originals and classics have stood the test of time, Kellen. These new young upstarts, they're not really better. They're just the same thing with a new coat of paint. Like, no one wants that. Everyone wants Coke Original.
All right, we are going to run through our games in quick succession and give you our appeal as our closing comments here at the end of this draft. My name is Kellen, the Red Tank, and I selected 1830, Glory to Rome, Dune, Glenmore 2, and Dwellings of Eldervale.
My list is Flamme Rouge, Modern Art, Imperial 2030, Hive, and Dixit.
My list is Beyond the Sun, Cthulhu Wars, The Resistance, Arboretum, and Burgle Bros.
And now the power turns to you, the royal listener. At BoardGameBarrage.com/draft, you will be able to vote and select a winner. Remember, one random participant will get a $50 gift card to an online board game retailer of their choice. And as soon as we stop this episode, we are going to get on and record the patron-only Off the Record, where we debate and figure out which one of us we think has actually won this draft. Thank you guys so much for listening to the show. Thank you, as always, to Heart Society Music for their fantastic intro and outro song, What's on Your Mind, Kid, from their album Wake the Queens. You can find us on all forms of social media at Twitter, at BRDGameBarrage, at Instagram, BoardGameBarrage, and you can join our Discord community where you can tell us all the games we should have chosen. Every time we draft, we always get new people, and they say, "You idiots, you should have drafted War Chest. My favorite game is Pulsar 28049, the best sci-fi game ever, you idiot." So join us at BoardGameBarrage.com/Discord and let us know what games we should have drafted or what games you would draft. Thank you so much for joining us, and good night.
Bye-bye.
The top 200, we are going to be drafting the BGG Board Game Geek top 200 to 300 games. I don't know how to say this. We are
Yeah, it's always
drafting
awkward.
100. We are drafting a collection of 5 games out of the BGG list of the top. There's no way to say this.
The numbers
BGG's
201
Yeah,
to
rank
300,
201
maybe?
to 300.
Like the top, the top just never works.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the top is a trap that I've fallen into.
There's a lot of these, West Kingdom, North Sea, and now we're in Scytheland. So I guess my question is Scythe or Raiders of Scythia?
Still Scythe. No mechs in Raiders of Scythia to my memory, so it's got that on it.
I'm just waiting for Paladins of the West Kingdom. Or, sorry. I'm just waiting for Tapestry of the West Kingdom. Is that funny? No, it's not. Never mind. Never mind.
He laughed.
Yeah, but that was a pity laugh, I could tell.
I would
Perfect,
never.
that's perfect outtake, though.
You trying to be funny?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Really makes the podcast grow, so it is much appreciated. I want to say thank you. We love you.
Thank you. We love you.
Can you imagine if that just is like right there at the end of my thing? Awkward. All right.